Okay, welcome back. I just finished drying out my sky with a hair dryer so that it was nice and dry and ready for us to work some watercolor washes into the buildings. So for your watercolor washes in your buildings, I'm just going to tell you to choose any kind of color. I'm going to take some orange here and put it into my other wash pan. Alright, so I've got a nice light wash of orange. I'm going to choose some red and make a nice light wash of red. Oops, I don't have any water in there. So that we've got a couple variety of different colors, just like our buildings on our final one and on the buildings on our watercolor one that we've shown you in the past here. I just took regular colors right out of the watercolor pans and made washes of them. So I'm going to start with just a red, and I'm basically just going to pull this brush right over the whole building. You don't want it to be dark, okay, because you're going to paint right over the windows later with a darker color. But you want to just fill in your buildings with color, one at a time, carefully pulling your brush, showing good brush control so that your painting looks nice and neat. Now if you get a point right here, like the paper must have still been wet there, and the red is running into, you can use a paper towel and blot that out so that it doesn't ruin your sky. Notice how the water is pooling in a couple places. That's good. We want that to happen because that's going to make your picture look interesting, because you'll have some light areas and some darker areas as you go through. Alright, so don't get too worried about that as far as your colors blending together. If they happen on the buildings like there and you don't want it like that, you can blot it out with your paper towel. But sometimes that actually kind of looks nice when you've got colors that right next to each other blending together on the buildings. It actually does not look that bad and actually could make your picture kind of interesting. So this really does not take that much focus or thought. You're just kind of filling in the shapes, almost like coloring in shapes. Of course, I do want it to be neat. I mean, take the time to make it nice, make it neat, and do a good job, of course. But all you're doing is you're filling in the large shapes of your buildings. Okay, and if you run into troubles, you can obviously use a smaller brush. Okay, like right up there on the top of my clock tower, I probably want to use a smaller brush so that I can get around there, because I want that face of my clock tower to be white. As you'll notice, there is no white in our wash pan, so the only white we have is the white that is on your paper. So if you want something to be white, you have to leave it white, like I'm leaving that clock tower white. Okay. At this point, just fast forward this Mr. Lundgren and you can kind of get a pretty good idea of what it will look like at the end, and then we'll get to the painting of our windows in the next session. So there's my finished version of our watercolor cityscape. You can kind of see I've done it just similar to this one, changed the colors ever so slightly. But the things we want to make sure we do is we blot out the clouds in the sky, and we get even watercolor washes over each of our buildings. When you're done, it's your own responsibility to take your old paper towel and swipe out the little watercolor palettes. If everyone just leaves their watercolor palettes dirty, then the next time they get dried out and it's really hard to get them clean. It takes me, if you're looking at the bottom of the screen, looking at the time frame, it probably takes me about 30 seconds to clean this out like that, and then give it to the person's job who it is to put that away, and it goes much quicker if you do that. Make sure you rinse your watercolor brushes out so there's no more paint in them, and put them into the correct container. If it's a number 2 watercolor brush, put it in the number 2 container. If it's a number 10 watercolor brush, put it in the number 10 department. Okay, and make sure you stack up your watercolors nice so they can dry easily. And then we'll come back in the next session and we'll do the windows on our buildings.